If you love Super Castlevania 4 but wish that it was a whole lot more gruesome, then let me introduce you to Heidelberg 1693. This is a gory and ultra-violent take on the side-scrolling action genre that oozes just as much style as it does blood. But is there more to this throwback spectacle than just over-the-top carnage? Grab your raincoat and slip on your best pair of boots because things are about to get real messy when I review Heidelberg 1693. You can complain all you want about last year, but 2020 has nothing on 1693. Set against the backdrop of the War of the Great Alliance, this is the story of what happens when King Louis XIV's evil and deceptive past comes back to bite him. Literally. When the Moon King raises an army of the dead to seek vengeance on the out-of-touch ruler, King Louis sends his bravest musketeer into battle to stop the demonic scourge before it completely engulfs France. Spread across 20 challenging stages, our hero fights his way into Germany in hopes of making it to the heavily fortified town of Heidelberg. But even before he gets there, our hero is met with supernatural resistance every step of the way. Thankfully, he came equipped with both his trusty rapier for melee combat and musket for long-range attacks, which is just enough to give him a slim but fighting chance against the zombies, vampires, and assorted monsters. With very limited moves and only a few secondary weapons to use along the way, the musketeer will need to use his brain and pick his battles wisely if he plans on making it through the throng of ghoulish creatures in order to defeat the Moon King. Now, if this formula sounds familiar, then it's probably because you've played a Castlevania game before. Between the haunting atmosphere and gorgeous pixel graphics, Heidelberg 1693 is more than a little reminiscent of some of the Belmont's earliest outings. With the linear stages and focused quest, I was immediately reminded of some of the pre-Metroidvania entries like Super Castlevania 4 and Rondo of Blood. You aren't exploring a large, interconnected world or leveling up the musketeer, because this is more of a straightforward adventure that feels like a real throwback to the 16-bit games that we grew up with. That's not to say that Heidelberg 1693 is a big ripoff, because it does do a lot to carve out its own identity. Beyond simply being a lot more gruesome than Castlevania, you'll also find that the story is much darker and the combat is more tactical in nature. A good example of this is the musket that we use for long-range attacks. Don't go into this expecting run-and-gun action, because the gun that we use will need to be reloaded manually after every single shot. That's multiple seconds of us being vulnerable as the animation plays out. It teaches you that you're going to need to be slow and methodical about your attacks. But not too slow, because there's a flying demon head that'll constantly take behind you, resurrecting the enemies that you killed. It's this constant tug-of-war between needing to be cautious and needing to be constantly moving that makes Heidelberg 1693 feel different from the games that clearly influenced it. Now, it's probably worth mentioning that this comes to us from the same developer as both 1917, the Alien Invasion, and Sturmfront, the Mutant War, two fast-paced shoot-em-ups that expertly mimicked the genre greats from the 1990s. While this side-scrolling adventure game may seem like a departure, you can still see the connection in the chaotic action. You'll have zombies roaming from all sides, enemy soldiers shooting at you, flying heads everywhere, and even giant ogres pounding the ground, all while cannons will be raining bombs down on you. There are times when this truly does feel like one of those bullet hell shooters. This is the kind of game that dares you to stay alive longer than a minute or two. Thankfully, there are enough checkpoints to keep the game from becoming too frustrating. That said, make no mistake about it, Heidelberg 1693 is incredibly hard. The action is unflinching and the bad guys have surprisingly good aim, and yet the difficulty is also inconsistent. Instead of ramping up the challenge, the game will have these massive difficulty spikes that come out of nowhere. You'll go from breezing through a really easy stage to slamming into a level that'll take you dozens of tries to get right. And then, just as quickly, you're right back to speeding through a sparsely populated area. You never really know what you're gonna get from one moment to the next. Part of what makes this game difficult is our hero's lack of moves and abilities. He can climb and double jump, and that's about it. He can't run, or dodge, or slide, or really anything else that you might find in one of those modern Castlevania games. He climbs, and he double jumps. And considering all that we're asked to do in the final few stages, I found myself wishing that the Musketeer was a little bit more agile. Something as simple as a roll or a run move could have made this game a lot easier to play. Of course, you can't help but get the feeling that a lot of these decisions were deliberate. I mean, the developer likely nixed a roll ability because it would have made dodging bullets too easy. And the constant difficulty spikes that come out of nowhere? Well, those were probably to keep you on your toes. Even the checkpoints seem designed to screw you over. Instead of being resurrected with full health, our demon hunting hero comes back with only one of his 3 hearts. That means that any damage that you take will send our Musketeer right back to that checkpoint. Man, talk about stingy. Well, I'm sure that some people will certainly be turned off by the difficulty. I ended up loving it. I was fully invested in the stunning world design, and I loved to see the graphics become more and more chaotic the closer to Heidelberg that we got. I was also impressed with the compelling cinemas, which are all presented in the style that reminds me a lot of like a 1920s silent film. And then there's the haunting music, the epic boss fights, and the incredibly satisfying ending. Look, I could go on, but I think that you should experience Heidelberg 1693 for yourself. Heidelberg may be a lovely place to visit these days, but you wouldn't want to go there back in 1693. Inspired by the 16-bit Castlevania games, this challenging new side-scroller is packed with expertly crafted level designs, memorable boss fights, a haunting soundtrack, and more blood and guts than you know what to do with. Sure, I wish that our hero had a few more moves and the checkpoints gave us our full health back, but the gorgeous pixel graphics will keep you going even during the most frustrating moments. As far as throwback experiences go, Andrade Games is 3 for 3, with Heidelberg 1693 being their best release yet. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite Castlevania wannabe? It can be a Metroidvania game, or hey, maybe something just like this one. There really are a shocking amount of them, so I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back next week with a big look at the Virtua Fighter franchise, followed by more reviews and maybe even a big announcement. You'll definitely want to tune in for that. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.